Oleksandr Usyk remains the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. The judges awarded him a unanimous decision, all three saying Usyk won 8 rounds to Fury's 4. And while at first I thought that was a little bit wide, upon second inspection, as we say, I tend to agree with those scores. Now, we could also argue that maybe Usyk won 7 rounds to Fury's 5, but either way, I think it was clear that Usyk did win that rematch. But I can completely understand why many folks would think otherwise, because I fell into that same sort of optical illusion, if you will, while I watched the fight live. Now, granted, I was only able to tune in for the final 5 rounds of that fight, but here's what was definitely apparent. It was absolutely clear that Fury stepped into the ring with a completely different game plan than he did the first time around. Fury made more use of his jab, which is kind of, one of the weapons I called for in my original breakdown prior to Fury-Usyk 1. Given Tyson's natural attributes, meaning the size, his height and reach advantage, it sort of behooves him to use that jab of his. Fury was also moving backwards far less than he was in his first fight. So initially, just because he looked so much different and so definitely better than he did in the first fight, you might think, oh my gosh, Fury surely is winning this fight. But what we have to remember is we're supposed to evaluate effective aggression. Therefore, the question is, was Fury in fact the more effective aggressor in this rematch? Well, let's take a look at this fight in segments. Now, I think it's fair to say that Fury definitely won the first 3 rounds of this fight, simply by being the more active fighter and definitely landing more punches. Now, in these first 3 rounds, Fury used his jab quite well. Both Usyk and Fury engaged in that sort of righty-lefty jab-canceling game a little bit, with each man kind of jabbing at each other's jab hand. Now, notice right off the bat, though, that Fury also uses his jab hand as a bit of a post, meaning he's just kind of sticking it out there to keep Fury away from him. He uses his jab hand to literally catch the punch like you would catch a ball with a baseball glove on, or he uses it to parry Usyk's jab hand down in a little bit of a swatting motion. Fury also uses his jab hand in kind of a loose back fist swat, so with his elbow kind of sticking out. Now, while these are all effective uses of your lead hand in terms of defense, they're not what we would call effective aggression. So therein lies a little bit of the optical illusion, because we see Fury sticking his jab hand out a lot, but those are not punches, really. They are defensive movements, and they are not thrown with bad intentions to hurt your opponent. They're thrown with the means of just keeping your opponent off of you. Now, when Fury did put his punches together, meaning when he would throw like a double jab right hand, he was very effective, whether it was a straight right hand to the head or whether he started throwing those nice right uppercuts to Usyk's body or to Usyk's head. Now, also in the first 3 rounds, Usyk was throwing mostly his jab, either jab to the body or jab to the head, and then straight left to the body of Tyson Fury. He did that persistently, a little bit sporadically in the first 3 rounds, but he was using that left to the body as his measuring stick. We did mention this in the pre-fight breakdown. For Usyk, it doesn't really make sense to try to use a jab to the head as a measuring stick, seeing as Tyson's got that height and reach advantage, and Tyson's also given to leaning back from Usyk's punches. So it makes much more sense to try to use Tyson Fury's body as the target for a measuring stick. Now, notice that right towards the end of the 4th round, that's where Usyk opens up with his overhand left, and it does land effectively on Tyson. So essentially, Usyk took the first 3 rounds to kind of gauge his distance, because you can't just start winging an overhand punch, whether you're righty and you're throwing in the overhand right, or you're a lefty and you're throwing an overhand left. You can't just open up with that punch, because then your opponent gets a read on it, number 1. Number 2, you're likely going to miss and leave yourself slightly out of position, open to getting countered. And finally, you don't want to just start wasting energy on winging an overhand punch. You really do have to get a good measurement on it before you launch it. Now, once Usyk got a good measure on his left hand, I think that's where he started to feel more comfortable and started to open up a little bit more. Either, again, with the straight lefts to the body, or overhand lefts to Tyson Fury's head, or sort of left hooks to Tyson, especially as Tyson would lean back and leave himself open. Now, it was still a very close fight because we could argue that heading into the second half of the fight, it was 3 rounds apiece. But here's what happened in the 7th that kind of perplexed me a little bit. In this round, Tyson Fury decides to start dropping his lead hand like he was fighting in the first fight. So by having his jab hand low, Tyson just allows Usyk to close distance without paying a price, so to speak. So now right off the bat, if Usyk can stand that much closer to Fury because Fury's jab hand is dropped, it just means that Usyk has to work just a little bit less to close distance. So I'm wondering why Fury decided to drop that jab hand. You know, was it because he was tired, or why didn't his corners sort of admonish him to keep that jab poking out there? It was also in the second half of the fight, from the 7th round onward, that Fury really did start to pick up more of his clinching and grappling once distance was closed. So for example, sometimes Fury would throw that right body shot and then immediately fall into a clinch with Usyk. He would sometimes headlock Usyk and then try to hit him with his free hand. He was fighting for either overhooks or underhooks. But it looked to me like Usyk was prepared for that because he was able to wrestle himself out of there and change the angle. Now, I do agree with Frank Warren in that I think it's odd that these judges didn't give Tyson 1 round. He said for the last 7 rounds. That seems strange. I mean, I would think that you would give Tyson the first 3 and at least 1 of the rounds in the second half. But regardless, if you look at the overall tone and tenor of the fight, it was Usyk who was pressing the action. Simply because Tyson Fury didn't look better than he did in their first match does not mean that he won the rematch. I think in order for Tyson to have pulled off a victory in this case, he would have had to double and triple up on that jab and use a jab as a damaging tool, a ramrod, and then line that straight up for a straight right hand, come back with a left hook. Very fundamental boxing, straightforward, but Tyson seemed a little bit too satisfied to kind of play with his jab hand a little too much. But huge props to both men, to both Usyk and Fury, for giving us a terrific rematch fight. Both men sacrificed a lot to put themselves through the training camp. So now Oleksandr Usyk and Tyson Fury can go home and enjoy their Christmas holidays with their family. And the rest of us can also kind of take a break from combat sport until the new year. So do you guys feel like Usyk decisively won that rematch? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.